Good morning, Dan and Amy. And so Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has delayed the vote on Obamacare replacement in the Senate till after the July 4th break.
I like the headline, Health Care on Hold.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not dead yet.
No.
We went through this process in the House. But the Wall Street Journal puts it this way to conservatives in particular. Now, the opposition is coming from a couple of different angles, much like it did in the House. But for conservatives, the Wall Street Journal asks this question. Republicans can either set aside their narrow self-interest and fix Obamacare on their terms, or they can collapse in disarray and bail it out on Mr. Schumer's. In 2018, they can defend an accomplishment or try to explain away a failure. Americans will know the difference, essentially saying, look, if you can't get 50 Republicans to agree on what Obamacare replace would look like, at least prior to conferencing with the House Democrats and reconciling the two proposals, then and Mitch McConnell warned his caucus about this, then you're essentially prompting us to have to deal with Chuck Schumer, who called the Senate bill in its current form rotten to the core. So what's going to come out of having to enlist some Democrats to pass some kind of replacement? Or do we just stand back and let the thing continue to collapse and let people continue to either face monopoly pricing from one health insurance provider or no pricing from no health insurance providers in their particular locale? These are the questions Republicans confront. What are the answers? For those, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Steve Moore. I'm not going to refer to him by his CNN title anymore. We're going to call him a former Donald Trump advisor and Wall Street Journal columnist. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Hi, Dan. Hi, Amy.
Good morning. So what is Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans, what are they to do on this matter?
Well, one of the things we've discovered over the last few months is how Republicans don't do health care very well, do they? And, they're pretty good at cutting taxes and, on budget reform and so on. But when it comes to health care, they've gotten all tangled up here. And it's a problem because politically the bill that they're promoting is only 20 to 25, 30% support. It's hard to get something like that through. Democrats have controlled the narrative here, which is, these mean Republicans want to throw people off of their health insurance. When in fact, the reality is that Obamacare is a catastrophe. It's melted down, as you just said. People are losing their health insurance. People can't afford the health insurance. I mean, the irony of this whole thing is that we're trying to repeal something called the Affordable Care Act, which is a joke because I saw a statistic yesterday that the average family is now paying $5,000 more for health insurance. If you're living on a $40,000, $60,000 income, $5,000 a year more, for health insurance is a big, big extra cost. And so, what do you do here? You got to just ram this thing through. You got to get it done. I mean, I think just talking about the politics, the political consequences of not getting this done are much worse than getting it done. And one last thing I would say, Dan, about, your little soliloquy there, is that I don't see any possible scenario of working with any single Democrat in the Congress. They don't want to repeal Obamacare.
Right.
They want to expand it. I mean, listen, Dan, to what our friend Bernie Sanders is saying. I mean, he's the only honest Democrat out there. He's saying, Obamacare is a mess. We need a single-payer government-run health care system.
Right. And he's on a 3-day tour promoting that. Bernie Sanders
I know
is.
He is.
Well,
so
before he and his wife go to prison.
Democrats agree with him. They just won't admit it. And that's, look, we knew from the very start. I was thinking about this last night when I was driving home. As you guys know, I worked for 10 years for the Wall Street Journal editorial page. When Obamacare was being debated, remember back in 2009, I think at the Wall Street Journal, we must have run 100 editorials predicting the things that would happen if Obamacare was passed. And everything that we predicted has happened. In fact, the only thing that we didn't predict is that it would melt down as fast as it had. So we were completely right. And when I say we, I just mean conservatives in general who made this argument against it. And yet here we are today, and we can't get rid of it because once you give an entitlement to a person, it's almost impossible to take it away.
Well, then if you do take it away, you look heartless, and you look as if you don't care about the poor and the indigent. Well, what about this, the insurance mandate? Do you think that might be put back into the bill?
Now, which mandate are you talking about?
Oh, no, the insurance mandate that you have to buy insurance else you'll get.
Oh, well, that's one of the worst features of Obamacare, because what's happened is, here's the other joke about this, Amy. I'm so glad you brought this up. I've been on CNN about 6 or 7 times in the last couple of days since that CBO report came out, which said something like 22 million people are going to lose their health insurance. Here's what people aren't telling you. Almost half of those people who, quote, are going to lose their health insurance, you know why they're going to lose their health insurance? Because if you take the individual mandate, if you don't force people to buy the health care and
right.
Figuratively stick a gun to their head and say you've got to buy it, people don't want it. Now, how are you doing a favor to people when you force them to buy something they don't want and they can't afford? You're actually liberating people from Obamacare. You're not burdening them by getting rid of that individual mandate.
Well, speaking of these competing arguments, to the extent that Republicans are making a discernible one, they really remind me of Illinois Republicans, which is
that's pretty bad.
Well, it is. It's at the first sign of criticism or the accusation of heartlessness, they just melt into a puddle of tears. And with respect to Medicaid, which is the basis for those heartless, barbaric comments coming from Pagliacci and Comrade Bernie and the gang, here's the fact. The Obamacare incentives with respect to Medicaid, a good example comes from Rich Lowry in his piece in the New York Post, where he talks about how the Obamacare had higher federal matches for able-bodied enrollees than for vulnerable populations. For example, West Virginia received 7 times as much federal money for spending $1 on an able-bodied adult as compared to spending $1 on a disabled person. The disabled person, the population Medicaid was originally conceived to serve in the first place. So, I don't understand why Republicans can't make these cases and they have to argue on the Democrats' terms of, you're heartless, no, I'm not. You're barbaric, no, I'm not. Lay out the case for the American public in a succinct, transparent way, why we're doing this, what we're trying to accomplish, and how we're going to get there, and just ignore the hysterics you knew were going to come from the left.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Dan. And on this Medicaid, most people don't understand how Medicaid works because, why would people have to understand it? But the one thing people should understand about it, it is the most perverse program ever invented. You couldn't come up with anything stupider than Medicaid, because essentially what you do is every time the state spends $2 on Medicaid, in a lot of states, it's $3 on Medicaid, they get $2 from the federal government.
Right.
So effectively, what these states have an incentive to do is get as many people on Medicaid as possible, load up the cost, because every dollar that they spend, they get 67 cents more from so a lot of states are trying to balance their budgets by putting more people on Medicaid. It's just a stupid system.
And the Senate proposal aims to deal with that at least in a step. Yeah.
By saying we're going to give you a set amount, a block grant, and saying to the states of Illinois and Wisconsin, Minnesota, and California, you've got this amount of money, spend it wisely. And by the way, we've had experiments in this. We did this in Rhode Island. We've done that in Indiana. And when you do that and give the states money and say, spend it wisely, you know what? They do. They find ways to reduce costs and so on. The other thing, on the narrative here, I think the Republicans haven't done a good enough job of basically telling people, look, there isn't going to be an insurance market left if we stick with Obamacare. Yeah, maybe 22 million people are going to lose their health insurance if we get rid of Obamacare, but if we keep it, nobody's going to have health insurance. And literally, the whole system is collapsing right before our very eyes. And all these, liberals are saying, well, all it needs is a Band-Aid. No, you can't. It's like saying, you just need a little plug to fix the hole in the Titanic. It's sinking, folks.
All right. Quick prediction, Steve, is ultimately something going to come out of the Senate?
It's going to pass. I don't know when it's going to pass.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be in a week or 2 weeks or by Labor Day, but they are going to get this thing done. And it's an ugly process, and the Republicans are going to take their lumps, but they got to get it done. And then, we got to get done, because then, guess what, Dan? We get to start talking about my favorite subject,
tax reform.
Tax cuts.
There you go. All right. Well, that'll be our next topic, hopefully, the next time you're on. Wall Street Journal columnist and former Donald Trump economic advisor, Steve Moore. Thanks for being with us, Steve. Appreciate it.
See you guys. Have a great week.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.